all school employees are mandated reporters of child abuse and neglect. Keep in mind that some students in schools are adults. The individuals required to report adults at risk are different than those listed as mandated reporters of child abuse and neglect. Professionals credentialed through the Department of Safety and Professional Services, like social workers, nurses, and physical therapists, have an obligation to understand their duty to report concerns related to adult students. For this training, we will refer to Child Protective Services as CPS. Let us now consider the obligation for school staff to report child abuse and neglect. Mandated reporters are legally required to make a report to local CPS or law enforcement immediately when they have a reasonable cause to suspect a child has been abused or neglected, or has been threatened with abuse or neglect, and the employee believes it will occur. The obligation to report child abuse and neglect does not apply to situations school employees observe or gain information on while they are not working in their professional role. Keep in mind that any person may contact CPS or law enforcement to report child abuse or neglect, regardless of whether or not that person has a legal obligation to make a report. To report child abuse and neglect, staff should make a phone call in a space that provides some privacy for the conversation to the local CPS or law enforcement agency. Local numbers can be found in the link provided in the additional resources. Reports should be made to CPS in the county where the child resides, not where the incident occurred. However, reports made to law enforcement should be directed to the jurisdiction where the suspected crime occurred. Wisconsin law requires mandatory reports to be made immediately by phone or in person. Staff must not wait for a convenient time in the school day or until the end of the school day to make a report. The reporter should be prepared to share basic information, which may include any of the following information. Basic demographic information for all family members, such as name, date of birth, sex, race, address, and phone number. A basic description of what happened. This includes the alleged child abuse or neglect that occurred or that is believed will occur. Any information known about when the incident happened and if it has happened more than once. Any information known about where the incident happened, including in which town or city. Statements made by the child. Observations of the child, including any easily visible injuries. Child and parent functioning. Protective factors and unique needs. And if the child is Native American or has Native American ancestry, so the Child Welfare Agency can determine whether the Indian Child Welfare Act is applicable.
There are some additional details that you should know about the obligation to report. First, mandatory reporting law does not require parents to be notified before or after a report is made. Second, do not seek out siblings of the student who has disclosed to interview them about their own experiences. Next, it's very important to know that reporting to other school staff does not fulfill the duty to report. For example, an email or voice message sent to another school staff member, like a school social worker, does not fulfill the duty to make a report. It is also not acceptable for another staff member to call and make the report on behalf of the staff member who has information that led them to have reasonable cause to suspect child abuse or neglect. It is okay for multiple staff members that have knowledge of the situation to make the report together. Additionally, staff should not assume that suspected child abuse and neglect has been reported by another individual with knowledge of the suspected abuse or neglect. For example, in a situation where a student has said that their caregiver is already aware of sexual abuse occurring, school staff must still make a report. Also, be aware that no one, including school leaders, may prevent a mandated reporter from making a report that they feel is necessary. You have learned that you must report when you have reasonable cause to suspect child abuse or neglect. How do you know if you have reasonable cause? Reasonable cause to suspect does not require proof, but it's an honest belief based on information obtained from sources that may include the child subject to abuse or neglect, personal observation, information learned from others, and/or written documentation that a child has or will be subject to abuse or neglect. Whether or not reasonable cause exists includes a consideration of the totality of circumstances of the specific situation, which broadly means to consider the whole picture of what you know about the situation and to consider if you have enough information to suspect that child abuse or neglect exists. In each circumstance, the first step is to start with the definitions of child abuse and neglect. Consider if you have information leading to suspicion that the situation in question may meet the definition of one or more types. When you are unsure if you have reasonable cause to suspect child abuse or neglect, you are encouraged to consult with a school administrator or pupil services professional if this person is immediately available. However, if that person is not in your building at the time or you cannot reach them by phone, you must not wait. Ultimately, you are responsible for the decision to report or not, and any advice given in consultation must be weighed with your professional judgment. In some cases, the information you have provides you with clear reason to suspect child abuse or neglect. For example, a student tells you that a parent has sexually assaulted them, or a child tells you that the bruises on their face are from a parent punching them in anger. In situations like this, it is clear you must immediately report. In any situation, if you have established that there is reasonable cause to suspect child abuse or neglect, make a report. Remember, it is the responsibility of CPS and law enforcement to conduct interviews of the child, and multiple interviews can traumatize a child as well as have a negative impact on the CPS assessment or criminal investigation. If a CPS professional asks you to conduct an investigation, you can refuse by reminding them that it's not your role. We just discussed situations when the information you have provides you with clear reason to suspect. In other cases, specifically when there are concerns related to neglect, it may be unclear whether you have reasonable cause. In these cases, you may consider gathering information to better understand the situation. When school staff gather additional information, the focus should be on gathering enough information to determine whether you have reasonable cause to suspect that neglect has or will occur. You should not be looking to prove or disprove neglect has occurred. Staff must use professional judgment. Poverty is often misidentified as neglect. When a child is in need of basic resources due to poverty, supporting a family with referrals to services and supports is the best response. But if there is any lack of necessary care or resources and it's not clear that it's due to poverty, or if the parents have been provided with resources and the concerns continue, a report to CPS or law enforcement may be necessary. For example, let's say a student walks to school on a cold day in the winter without weather-appropriate footwear. The teacher asks the student where their boots are. The student replies that their parent did not buy them boots. Does the teacher have reasonable cause to suspect neglect? No. In this case, the teacher should ask some open-ended questions to better understand the whole picture. Let's say the teacher says, "If you let me know more about the situation, I might be able to help. Help me understand what's going on." The student replied, "My cousin was supposed to give me his old ones, but he forgot to bring them over. And my mom said we're out of money this month, so she will buy me some as soon as she gets paid." In this case, the appropriate response would be for the teacher to share resources in the school or community that could help provide weather-appropriate footwear. If the teacher does not feel comfortable having this discussion with the student or parent, they could ask for support from a pupil services staff member. Let's consider another example. Let's say that the same situation I just described happened. However, after talking with the parent about resources, the student continues to walk to school in the cold and snow without boots. Now the student is limping and has severe frostbite on their feet. The student says that they told their mom last night that their feet hurt from walking outside, and they wish they'd had warmer gear, but that their mom didn't seem to care or do anything to help. In this case, there's reasonable cause to suspect neglect, as the student's physical health was seriously endangered by the lack of care, and the teacher should report to CPS or law enforcement. As in this example, gathering information about resource concerns may include discussing these concerns with students and parents or caregivers. Approach families with empathy and display caring and concern. Families are part of the solution. When school staff do not feel comfortable having conversations about resource concerns with parents, support may be obtained from other staff who are more comfortable with this action, including school administrators and pupil service professionals, like school social workers, counselors, psychologists, and nurses.
Now that you have a better understanding of reasonable cause, we will briefly discuss the impact of bias in reporting. Staff use professional judgment to determine whether there is reasonable cause to suspect a child is being maltreated, based on an understanding of statutory definitions. Professional judgment is inherently subjective and is influenced by the personal experiences of the staff member. This subjectivity includes conscious and unconscious biases. While bias is not always negative, it can lead to discriminatory actions and harm. Disproportionality based on race, culture, and ethnicity exist in all decision points in the child welfare system, including reporting. Reports made by school staff when there is no reasonable cause to suspect child abuse or neglect creates unnecessary stress for children and families, mistrust of helping professionals, and reduces the ability of CPS to respond to situations that need it most. To reduce these disparities, school staff are encouraged to be aware of and to address the impacts of individual biases on how they view family concerns. When considering how your perspective impacts the way you make decisions about concerns, consider whether the view of the situation would be different if the family had different demographics, race, culture, primary language, family structure, socioeconomic status, or if your perspective is based on individual family member characteristics such as identity, gender, sexual orientation, or educational level. Ask yourself if the concern could be explained by a difference in parenting styles, perhaps differences related to hygiene, food choices, youth supervision, or disciplinary practices. Consider whether the concern stems from poverty, as opposed to neglect. It is important to note that this does not mean you should dismiss information indicating child abuse and neglect by attributing the concerns to cultural differences.